Alrighty, chat. Today we're going to talk about whether men can express their emotions. So this is from presumably a man. It's okay for men to express feelings other than anger. It doesn't make you soft or less manly. It shows you understand your emotions and aren't afraid of them. Just putting it out there in case anyone needs to hear. And this is a great conversation. This is Dr. Kirk Honda, who's awesome, has taught us a lot of stuff here in the Healthy Gamer community. And it's not just men who say this, right? So women are actually asking for this. I need God to stop sending me emotionally unavailable men. I love my man, very vulnerable, emotionally present, and unafraid to express his feelings. So please date emotionally intelligent men. It's nice to have someone who's aware of your sensitivity and learns how to handle your feelings gently with patience and care. It is comforting to show your vulnerability to someone and have them learn how to respond to it with understanding. So this is a little bit different, right? This is about someone who is dating an emotionally intelligent man who is capable of sitting with her feelings. But if we sort of look at it, there's a lot of contrary evidence as well, right? So woman, why don't men share their emotions? A man shares his emotions and then here's the reaction. And it's not just men who say this, right? So this is presumably comment guy, which is a dude. But women will say, I disagree. I like strong men, but if a man cried because something really tragic happened, death of a child, parent, etc., I would not think badly of him. However, the problem here is the nonstop crying over all events. The guy is obviously just a wet wipe. Men crying at the altar is a red flag. When I saw my wife walk down the aisle, I was overwhelmed with joy and excitement, and I smiled from ear to ear. I knew I was marrying the greatest female to walk the earth. Men crying is extremely bizarre behavior. Not me, not my friends, not my crowd. I just asked my wife, what would you have done if you saw me crying when you were coming down the aisle? And she said, I would have walked away. So what's going on here, right? Because some people are saying, okay, it's okay for men to show their emotions. It's good for men to show their emotions. Some women are saying, I want men to show their emotions. I want someone who's emotionally available. And then other women are saying, no, this is a terrible idea. I've talked to so many men in my office who will say, oh yeah, like when I show my emotions, it seems like it gives women the ick. And once they get the ick, there is no removing the ick. So as a man, you must never cry in front of a woman. You can cry in private, you can cry with your best friend, you can cry with your dad, even though you ought not to, but you must never cry in front of a woman. And this is in response to presumably a woman saying, my boyfriend cries a lot and it's starting to get on my nerves. We've been together for about 8 years and this crying thing is pretty new. He has been drinking a lot more too. Music moves him to tears. Caring about his friends moves him to tears. Exciting special things brings him to tears. I don't know what to do. At first, I thought it was nice that he felt safe enough to let emotions out. Now I don't know how to react. I find it irritating. So this is like kind of an interesting pattern. On the one hand, we're saying men should be emotionally available, men should express their emotions, but there are a lot of experiences of both men and women saying, yeah, when men do express their emotions, if they do it too much, I don't like it, it gives me the ick, they should stop. So what's really going on here? So penalized for challenging traditional gender roles, why heterosexual relationships in which women wear the pants may be more precarious. So this is a paper that's looking at traditional gender roles and how when men and women step out of traditional gender roles, how they're perceived. In 2 experimental studies conducted in the United States and Netherlands, we found, and this is decent sample sizes, okay? This is like 223 and 269. We found that when encountering role-reversed relationships, participants perceive the woman as the more dominant and agentic one, and the man as the weaker one in the relationship. They also perceive women in role-reversed relationships as less likable, have less respect for men in role-reversed relationships, and expect that such relationships are less satisfying. In addition, we found that both male and female partners in role-reversed relationships considered the man to be the weaker one and the woman to be the more dominant one, okay? What we see is that there are very real perceptions that if a man starts to behave in a more feminine fashion in a relationship, they're often viewed by both men and women as weaker. The flip side of it is also true, and I know a lot of women who have been frustrated with this, where if they sort of set boundaries or advocate for themselves, they're viewed as a bitch. And so there are a lot of like male type behaviors in the corporate world that women just aren't allowed to express. Hey y'all, if you're interested in applying some of the principles that we share to actually create change in your life, check out Dr. K's Guide to Mental Health. And so we start by understanding what literally is meditation. How does experience shape us as human beings? How do we strengthen the mind itself as an organ? And so by understanding our mind, we understand a very, very simple tool, a crucial tool that we have to learn how to use if we want to build the life that we want to. So check out the link in the bio and start your journey today. But let's look a little bit deeper into the research. Gender differences in the social cost of affective deviance. So what does this mean? Affective deviance means when we start to express our emotions in more unusual ways, what is the social cost of it? The current study tested whether men and women receive different degrees of social punishment for violating the norms of emotional expression. This is the way that men are supposed to express their emotions. This is the way that women are supposed to express their emotions. When people step outside of that, how do they get treated? Displaying an incongruent emotional expression relative to a congruent one harmed judgments of women more than men. Women are expected to be more emotionally expressive than men, making an incongruent expression more deviant for women. These results highlight the importance of social norms in construing in others' emotional displays, which can subsequently determine acceptance or rejection of a person. So what we see here is that when you express emotions that are not normally what you should be expressing, both men and women get punished for it, but women actually get punished more than men according to this study. So when we sort of look at the data, what we find is that there does seem to be variance in the way that men and women respond to emotional expression. And furthermore, there's some evidence that if men start to express emotions in a way that is not congruent with what we expect of them, this is true of women as well, happens with both, that both of these groups actually get punished. If you're a man who's alive in the world today, you are faced with a very real problem. On the one hand, a lot of people say you should be emotionally vulnerable, you should be emotionally available, it's okay and healthy for you to express your emotions, but a lot of men that I've worked with personally seem to get punished by it, right? And here's just another quick example. Why do men not like to vent? What's so wrong with saying how you feel? Telling him it's okay to vent so you can use his lows against him in the next argument. And this is why men don't show emotions. So I think this comes down to an understanding of emotional labor. And now we're going to look at something really scary. So Matt Walsh says, we hear a lot about the emotional labor women deal with, but men have their own emotional labor, and it's hardly ever discussed or even acknowledged. I do think that women often bear a mental load that men don't, but like Matt says, here's a woman agreeing with Matt, men bear a load that women don't. So here's the crazy thing. Not only does this woman agree with him, but this is a paper from Feminist Philosophy Quarterly that talks about stoicism as emotional compression is emotional labor. So this is a paper from a feminist publication that talks about a different kind of emotional labor called emotional compression. Specifically, I argue that the social norms around stoicism and restricted emotional expression are masculine-coded forms of emotional labor and that they are potentially pro-social. Okay? My investigation here is premised on a different description of the emotional labor asymmetry, which opens up different prescriptive possibilities. I begin with the premise that not only is there a gendered and asymmetrical distribution in how much emotional labor is performed, but also there might be meaningful and informative distinctions in what kind of emotional labor is characteristically performed by different genders. Specifically, I argue that the social norms around stoicism and restricted emotional expression are masculine-coded forms of emotional labor and that they are potentially pro-social. So what does this mean? So one of the big arguments out there is that women perform a lot of the emotional labor in a relationship. That when we look at a relationship between men and women, men provide one kind of thing, like they provide money, they provide a home, they provide security, and women provide their homemakers, right? They provide emotional support, they take care of the children, they plan the birthday parties. And as society has progressed, and I do believe it's progression, I don't think feminism is evil, I think it's good when human beings are capable of being independent and not beholden to someone else. As women have become more financially stable, more financially independent, there's a growing dialogue about how women not only do earn the money, but they also perform all of this emotional labor, and that this is fundamentally unfair, which I agree with. This is kind of subtle, and I want to take a moment to talk about this. So we weren't, back when we were talking about men provide this and women provide this, we sort of weren't aware of the emotional labor that women provide. It's taken decades of feminist advocacy, psychological research for us to realize that the work that women do is a form of emotional labor. And now most people are aware of this. But I think we're lagging behind. And what we don't acknowledge is that there is a form of emotional labor that men do, which is called emotional compression. So oftentimes, if you look at a heteronormative relationship, a woman will provide some degree of emotional labor, but the job of the man is to be the rock. Right? So when the shit hits the fan, the man is the one who's supposed to be stable, right? When your son or your daughter is going through a tough time, you as a man are supposed to be the rock. You are supposed to be able to handle what the emotions of the people around you with strength and fortitude. This is a form of emotional labor. Being able to receive and hold the emotions of other people, being able to be stoic and handle emotions, even suppress your own emotions, is a form of emotional labor that you provide to a relationship. If you are a man, not even a man, if you're a woman who suppresses a lot of your emotions, you know how emotionally taxing this is. Literally, if we look at the brain, there's a part of our brain called the amygdala and limbic system. This is where we feel emotions, and it is cognitively draining to suppress emotions. One of the 3 largest drains on willpower is actually emotional suppression. So I think if we sort of look at this feminist paper and we look at there are other sort of bits of evidence, but this is relatively a new concept, we find that men do provide a very important source of emotional labor in relationships, which is actually emotional compression. And this, I think, explains the variance in people's experiences. So some men will say it's great to express emotions. Some women will say it's awesome when my man expresses emotions. Other men will say this is a terrible idea. So how should you navigate this? I think you've got to understand the nature of emotional labor, the nature of emotional compression. And once we understand these things, we will know how to move forward. So here are a couple of things that we want to understand. The first is that sharing emotions is not binary, right? I know this sounds so simple, but it's something that I don't think we acknowledge enough. Sharing emotions is not just like a yes or a no. There are gradients of sharing emotions. So one of the biggest mistakes I think you can make is to confess your love for someone. So let's understand what's going on here. When you confess your love, you have a gigantic pile of emotions. When we're talking about a confession, that means the love has been building up inside you, building up, building up, building up. So you have 100 units of love, and the person that you're talking to is completely clueless. So their understanding is at 0, and your experience of love is at 100. So when you confess your love, they're at 0 and you are at 100. And this can feel overwhelming for people because suddenly it's coming out of nowhere. So this is what's really important to understand. There is emotional expression, and then the receiving person needs to be able to emotionally compress, right? There is the amount of emotions that I share, and then there's the amount of the emotions that the other person can handle. So if you go into a psychiatrist's office and you emotionally dump on them, we're okay with that because we are trained at a high level of emotional compression. We can handle all of that emotion. We can be stoic. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make is when you vent too many emotions to someone who is not capable of emotional compression. And by the way, remember, this is a male-coded form of emotional labor, which means many women are not very good at this. So I think this is what really gets people kind of screwed up, is that when a man expresses too much emotion to a woman who is unable to handle that volume of emotion, that's when they get the ick. That's when it becomes too hard. Because when I put too many emotions on you and you can't handle them, how do you feel? You feel bad. You feel overwhelmed. You may feel guilty. You may feel uncomfortable. You may feel angry. And when I put you in a situation where you feel overwhelmed and uncomfortable, who are you likely to blame? You are likely to blame me for putting you in this. Now, this gives me the ick, right? You're expressing way too many emotions. I can't handle it. I feel ick. And let's think about, what is the ick? How do people get the ick? The ick is your brain's way of telling you, avoid this level of emotional expression because we can't handle it. It's a danger signal that you send to yourself to avoid someone's emotions, okay? So if you want to know how to do this in a safe way, you need to express the right level of emotion to the person who can emotionally handle what you express. So here's the second thing to understand about this, okay? So when we look at women, and this is sort of like, there's research on this. So women are socially conditioned and trained to be more affectively mirroring for emotional expression. If you look at the average woman versus the average man, what'll happen is that women are taught how to match someone's emotions, right? So it's not that women will go from 0 to 100. They oftentimes don't do that. And I know I'm generalizing here, and a lot of men do this, so please forgive me for the generalizations. It's just the simplest way I know how to explain this. So some people, let's say, are taught how to match someone's emotional expression. So if you have like women who talk to each other, oftentimes what will happen is they'll express a little bit of discomfort, the other person handles it, they express some discomfort, the next person handles it. And so you have this gradually increasing affective mirroring. Oh my God, my boyfriend sucks. Oh my God, I know, aren't boyfriends awful? Yeah, he did this. Oh my God, I know they did that. My boyfriend did this. And so they sort of do this thing where they don't confess, right? They don't go from 0 to 100. They're very, very good at empathically connecting with each other. And men can do this too. If we're trained in the right way, as a psychiatrist, I do this all the time. I mirror people's emotions. So this is absolutely a skill that can be trained. It is just socialized more in women. So there's this level of like increasing affective expression. Now, this is really hard for men because we're not taught how to do this, which means that when we express emotions, we become wet wipes, right? We're crying all the time. Now we have too many emotions. So we sort of let all of our emotions out at once, and that can be too much for someone to handle. The other really important thing about this is if you look at networks of emotional support between men and women, they tend to be different. So I tend to have a handful of tight guy friends. And if I want to talk about my emotions at all, which even as a psychiatrist, as a dude, I almost never discuss my emotions with anyone, including my wife, my brother, my closest connections, because I just sort of handle them on my own. That's why I love yoga and meditation and all that good stuff, right? But even if I sort of disclose them, oftentimes what I'll do is I will have meaningful disclosures with individual people. So here's why a man disclosing their emotions to a man works really well. So remember that men go from 0 to 100 very easily, okay? So we go from 0 to 100. But who are we talking to? We're talking to a man who has a high capacity, a high tank of emotional compression. So the dude that I'm talking to is able to handle a lot of emotions, compress it, stay stoic. That's why men disclosing things to men works actually pretty well. We can handle another dude falling apart. We become, I don't know if y'all have experienced this, but usually when your bro falls apart, you're kind of like, you hold it together for them, right? You put your arm around and you're like, bro, calm the fuck down, bro. You'll be okay. Let's get you hammered. Like, let's go for a walk. Let's do something. Your capacity to handle a lot of emotion is actually pretty high. So this works out pretty well. The other thing is if we look at the social network that women usually have, the emotional network that they have, theirs is kind of like a spider web. I can't draw a spider web. Oh my God, I'm so bad at drawing a spider web. So they tend to have many more connections. So my wife is like friendly with like tons of people. So the other thing that they tend to do is when they express emotions, if they have 100 units of emotion, they will distribute their emotional burden across lots of different people. So when my wife goes through a tough time, she may have conversations with 5 or 6 different people. When my female patients go through a tough time, they may have conversations with 5 or 6 different people. And that's because, once again, if we look at women, women's experience with emotional compression is lower. So they may only be able to handle 50 units at a time, which is totally fine because their female friends are sharing 25 over here, 25 over there, 25 over here, 25 over there. So if you're a dude, you should pay attention to these two things, right? How much emotion am I expressing? and how much emotion is the other person able to handle. And if you're trying to figure out, is it safe to express emotions, you should answer these two questions. And this is also something that I think is really interesting. So if we go back to this tweet, right? Please date emotionally intelligent men. It's nice to have someone who's aware of your sensitivity and learns to handle your feelings gently with patience and care. What kind of emotional labor is this? This is a woman who is looking for a man who is skilled at emotional compression. So it comes down to these two variables. So if you're trying to figure out, is it safe? The first thing is, how much emotion are you expressing? And the second is, what is this person's capability of handling the amount of emotion that you express? So if you want to share something and don't want to give people the ick, you should use this emotionally distributive approach, right? So before you confess your feelings to one person, or if you're really sad about something and you're afraid that you're going to give this girl the ick, talk to a couple of your bros about it. Decompress some of that emotion first.